In this video, I'll be showing you a new Tempest build that I've been using in both of the BG modes with great success, and it does an insane amount of damage to any and all players, even those that have much higher stats than you. So since the nerf of Windwalk, many players have been searching for a new PvP build for Tempest that can kind of do the same things and have similar outplay potential, because I know I have. And I think I've found it with this build. I'll be going over everything in depth, similar to my previous PvP guide, so check the video description for the timestamps, and I'll also put them on the screen here for all the relevant information. As well, I'll be linking all my other videos that kind of delve deeper into some of these sections down in the description. As well, you can check out my Discord and ask some questions about anything Diablo Immortal. So without further ado, let's get into the build. Starting with the skills and essences. So we're going to be using Rolling Surf, Crosswinds, Tidal Rush, and Flowing Strike. I'm using Wind Edge also because I have a 6% damage increase for it on my charm, and I do use the dash from it often to catch up to enemies. However, this dash can get you in trouble, and if it is getting you killed more than anything else, then I would just recommend using Wave Edge instead. On to the essences. For our Helm essence, we're going to be using Unyielding Vision, and this is going to give Rolling Surf a little bit more damage, make our crits do some AoE. For our chest piece, we're going to be using Memento Onus, which makes Flowing Strike into a dash that also stuns. This is part of the backbone of most Tempest builds. And then we pair that with the shoulders Safe Borders, and these will make you be able to use Flowing Strike during loss of control. It gives you a little bit of an immunity duration as well, so you can use this on an engage as well. And then for the pants, we're going to be using the Pure of Will. Now, these are the Tidal Rush pants that we're using that kind of make this build super nice. So what it does is it turns Tidal Rush into a dash that stuns. And I'll be going over how this really works a little bit more in depth later. But basically, when you're using Tidal Rush and you press it, you'll see you have this big area. And this small circle right here is what you need to land in order to stun and get your damage boost. And now on to the main hand essences. Of course, we have Skein Parter. No real need to explain this one. It's just the best essence to use. Shriekworth, which is going to increase Crosswinds damage, make it a little more AoE, more than it already is. Hurricane Hitch for our offhand, which empowers Crosswinds to attack with our primary attacks. This is where a lot of your damage is coming from as well. And then finally, Morozzi Spine. This is going to increase the Zephyr damage, which does have a big role in BGs, as the Zephyrs are going to be doing a lot, and a lot of times you can secure kills because your Zephyr was left over in the back. It's almost like another dot that can apply dots. So now on to the set items. The three best sets on Tempest are Gloom, Vithus, and Monkbank, so you should use any combination of these three as you see fit. I personally use 4 Gloom, 2 Vithus, and 2 Mountebank at all times in PvP, but you can just as easily use 4 Gloom and 4 Vithus for some more damage output, or maybe 4 Mountebank, 2 Vithu, 2 Gloom if you really need to be tankier. So try out what I'm using and then adjust as you see fit. And while on the topic of the set items, let's discuss the normal gems and magic attributes for these set pieces. So you should at the very least have these exact sockets on all your set items. Yeah, triple sockets on everything except the rings, and making sure your rings have blue sockets. Armor Pin is really the only stat that you need on Tempest, especially if you're using Mountebank and you have 4 out of 4 Flowing Strike gear, then you're going to have a lot of shields. So fill up your blue sockets with sapphires and maybe leave 2 or 3 open for some aquamarines. And that's what I do. I have all level 7 blue gems, so I use 7 sapphires and 2 aquamarines. This puts me at a really high armor pin, and I still have enough armor that I'm not just getting one-tapped by most things. And then the magic attributes for these set items. So there are only a few things you really want to look at. So for the waist and boots, you want to make sure you have beneficial effect duration on here. If you don't have anything else, make sure you have that. And then on the neck, gloves, and rings, we can put skill cooldown reduction. So I recommend trying to get the skill cooldown reduction first if you can. A lot of times I get rings or I get set pieces that already have one of these damage done or taken from players on it. So I'll try to put skill cooldown reduction instead. But you can just use the damage taken from players and damage done to players. These are really the only bonuses that aren't affected by the Cycle of Strife and reduced to about 30% effectiveness. So you can stack these up on many of your pieces. And so now let's go over the magic attributes for legendary items. I have made a full video going over these, which I'll link below, but I'll still cover them briefly here. There are a few attributes that work really well on Tempest, and in order of best to worst, these are crit hit chance increase, crit hit damage increase, attack speed, damage to enemies suffering loss of control, primary attack damage increase, and skill damage increase. Again, this isn't an exhaustive list of what's good, but you should really shoot for having any combination of these, if nothing else. And then, of course, on our chest pieces and pants, if you have the ability to put beneficial effect on there, then you should. And then also with the legendary items, we're going to need to utilize the eternal attributes that Tempest has. The most important one, as always, is going to be Flowing Strike, as this will give you a very nice shield, which is what makes most of these Tempest builds good. And now with the addition of the Tidal Rush eternal attribute, this one is almost just as important. I was only using one piece of this in my initial testing of this build, and I was doing pretty well, but I was able to get 2 more pieces, and I noticed an immediate substantial improvement in my damage output. Not even whales were safe from the damage. You know, of course, I'm still taking a lot of damage from these whales because I'm not making myself necessarily tankier by having Tidal Rush. However, it just goes to show that I was able to damage anybody. If they don't have a cheat death, then you can burst down pretty much anyone and stun lock them. Additionally, they also added new eternal attributes for crosswinds. And this one is honestly very cool looking, and it will add some free damage to your build. But I wouldn't worry too much about getting the pieces. You know, having them is super nice, but it's not the end of the world. Same goes for Rolling Surf, as it just adds a little bit of damage to your attacks, but there's no need to stress if you have 0 of them. So just to recap, get 4 out of 4 Flowing Strike gear, 3 out of 4 works as well, and try to have at least 2 Tidal Rush pieces. And if you're having trouble finding them, luckily we can craft things now. I was able to use Rhodolite and craft one of these, and then I got lucky and crafted another one using the ores without the fine craft. And so now on to the Reforge bonuses. Again, I've made a deeper dive into these in another video, which I'll link down below, but you should try to copy what I have here if possible. Using the Vengeance set is very good in PvP, and the bonuses from it are also very good. So the biggest thing is having duration of beneficial effect, damage taken from players reduced, and damage to players increased. Again, these 2 damage modifiers with players are not affected by Cycle of Strife, so you are getting the full 1%, whereas this attack speed would be like 0.3% during BGs. So if you're not able to get Reforges similar to this, then I would recommend you just use whatever you have for PvE, as a lot of those bonuses will still increase your damage on players. And these are things like skill damage increase, crit hit damage increase, primary attack damage increase, and so on. So ideally you want to have these PvP specific setups, but using some of these PvE bonuses, quote unquote, are still going to work out for you. Now, onto the Paragon tree. So we're going to be using Gladiator with some of my previously mentioned secret tech, but the skills we're using are Cheat Death, of course, for the obvious repeatable Cheat Death. Grizzled Veteran, which is going to give us a flat damage increase and reduction on players. To the Victor, which increases Grizzled Veteran to 12% after we kill someone, which is going to help you chain kills together, which works very well with Juggernaut. So after you get 6 kills in a row without dying, you get healed back to full HP. And not only that, your size is increased by 10% and you get 20% increased movement speed. So you can play around this and almost use it as another cheat death. Oftentimes I'll have 5 kills. I'll see an opportunity to get that 6th one, and even though I'm very low and I would potentially die, as long as I can secure that 6th kill, then I'll be full HP and potentially now I can get a 7th or an 8th kill. And this happens often. So I'll try to show some of that in the gameplay towards the end. And then finally, we're also using First Aid. Now what this does is just basically whenever you reach low HP and you're next to a teammate, you're going to start recovering a lot of your health back, up to 45% of your health back. This one is also kind of another cheat death because it will proc, and then you can even walk away from the fight for those 3 seconds, just wait, and come straight back in. Now you have usually over half HP. And then the legendary skill that we're using in the Paragon tree is Overloaded. This is to give us some attack speed because I'm only using 2 pieces of Vithu. And as well, when this procs, you can reach 70-80% attack speed easily. And that burst damage that you get from that will be immense. Additionally, if you have a harder time staying alive, then you can try to use Benefactor. And this will just give you an extra shield whenever you use a buff. But I would recommend using Overloaded, as the best way to not take damage is to kill the enemy. Now onto the gems. So I've put out a video that highlights how you don't need to be high reso to do a lot of damage, which I will link below. But in PvP, having some resonance does make a little bit of a difference. It's still not as much as you might think, but you do want to have some resonance. On screen right now is my current gem loadout. I also aux in a Colossus Engine instead of my Void Spark, and a Spiteful Blood instead of my Wolf Heart. So the Colossus Engine will increase your damage dealt from your skills, and the effect of having more size is very nice, because it will make the hitbox for Flowing Strike bigger, which makes it easier to land, easier to stun. And then as a result of being bigger, your character is just a little bit faster. It's not a movement speed increase, but your tune just travels faster. And the Spiteful Blood is a very good gem to aux in, because even at the very low rank of 1, when you aux it, you can still use it at its full potential, because it's a very, very good counter against DH and even other Tempests that are trying to kite you around. And then I'm also using a Pain Clasp and a Viper's Bite to give myself a dot to make full use of that Pain Clasp. The damage boost from a Pain Clasp is very, very nice and will add to this high damage output of the build. If you don't have a Viper's, you can use an Everlasting Torment, or if you don't have another dot, then you can honestly use it on its own. For a good handful of games, I was not even using a Viper's, I just had my Roiling as a dot for that little burn, and I was still doing very well with it. And if I'm not mistaken, some of the other dots that people can put on enemies will help proc Pain Clasp. And so now I'll briefly touch on charms. If you don't have a good charm, then you must be collecting your weekly silver and crafting yourself some imbue stones so you can put them on your current charm. The biggest things to have are going to be Rolling Surf and Crosswinds. This is where all of your damage is coming from, really. So if you can get these two even at 2%, I'd highly recommend it. Another source of a little damage is going to be your pets and their traits. Just try to get yourself to 11 out of 11 traits. I don't even have all 11. The one that I'm missing is Maximum Life Increase, but I'm not too bothered about that. I'm still getting the crit hit chance and the skill damage dealt to players. So try to max these out. The easiest way to do this is just buying super cheap pets that are like 120 stats, or even now making them. It seems to be pretty easy to make pets that have 120 stats and some traits. And then of course, using Savior on your main pet is going to be very important. But other than that, I would never put any more thought into familiars. A lot of it is confusing. Another less frequently talked about thing is the Warband room and the bonuses from these rooms. You should be using Attacker or Protector, depending on your own stats and even who's in the match with you. Oftentimes, I'll change around my Warband room in the time before a match starts, because I'm looking at who's in there with me, what classes are there, and if I can tell that the enemy won't be super tanky, then I'll put on Attacker, but otherwise I'm usually running Protector. And one thing you'll never see anybody touch on is the Iben Fahd Sanctum. So let's talk about it. So you should put all of your garnets into armor penetration, and then once it becomes more expensive for 1 level of armor pen than it does for 10 levels of potency, then that's what you should pick. You can additionally just keep putting everything into the armor pen, but it is more worth it that you'll spend 2,000 garnets to get 10 levels versus 3,000 for just 18 armor pen. And with the sapphires, you can do a similar thing, putting most of it into armor penetration and armor, and then a little bit into potency and resistance as the armor and armor pen gets more expensive. So I usually have a number for my armor penetration that I shoot for, and then I'll spend the rest on other things. You can get this number by going into a BG and just looking around at what everybody's armor is at, and you want to have more than that. So it could be 5,000 for you, depending on what your normal gems look like, 3,500 or 4K, but have this number, try to reach it, and then you can allocate these gems in other places. With the Burl, you should be using this for armor and resistance. I prefer stacking some armor on there to take less damage, especially on Tempest, because I can just use Flowing Strike and get out of most CC. The resistance isn't super great, but it is a good consideration to try and get your resistance up so that you can take less damage from dots, as the duration of the dots will be lower. And then finally, I will reveal some hidden tech for those of you who have made it this far into the video. So if you go into your Helliquary and look at your demonic remains, you can do something like this and save all of your 2-stat Fort Willpower remains and slot these in before you start a match. The little bit of CR decrease isn't too much, for how much fortitude and willpower you're gaining. And a lot of times you'll gain willpower. You'll gain a lot of willpower because your triple stat won't even have it, as you can see here. And so you can do this with every single piece. And this ends up giving me basically 100 armor, 100 armor pen, 100 potency, 100 resistance. So it's just another little thing you can do to kind of get an edge. If you don't do this, you may not even realize it, but it is something cool to do if you like to min-max. And so here's a final look at my stats before we get into how to play the build. I'm maximizing my armor penetration, of course, and trying to stay at a relatively high resonance level compared to my maximum, which is around like 4,700. So you can see I'm down about 500 or so, but. And then make sure you do have these eternal affixes for Tidal Rush and for Flowing Strike, more importantly, before you try out the build. These are just as important as wearing set pieces. Getting into the gameplay, let's first understand how the skills work and what the combos look like. Flowing Strike dashes you in a direction and will stun anything caught in your path, and this makes it very easy to hit and is usually going to be what you do to engage and start your fights. Once you've stunned the enemy once with Flowing Strike, you should immediately hit them with Tidal Rush to kick in that extra damage boost from the Eternal Gear. And Tidal Rush can be potentially awkward to use if you're not familiar with how it works. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, it looks like it dashes like Flowing Strike, but it is a small circle that's a point and click. So once you're comfortable landing both abilities, then you can use these to stun lock anyone while you end their lives. And this even works on those pesky monks that are jumping around you like gnats. You just need to wait for them to finish waffling and then Flowing Strike them. Once they get hit with Flowing Strike, you hit them with Tidal Rush, and then you hit them with Flowing Strike again, and then you hit them with Tidal Rush again. All right, whichever way you want to do it. You should start with Flowing Strike because that one's the easiest to hit. And so if they don't have a cheat death, then they're just going to melt and disappear. And on the topic of cheat deaths, if someone is in the process of going through their cheat death and they're coming back alive, say that be from Gladiator or from Borrowed Time on Necro, try to stun them immediately after they come back alive. You can practice the timing in your BGs until you get it right, but if you can time this correctly, then there's absolutely nothing anyone can do once they come out of their don't die, and it almost makes it pointless for them. And now onto the tactics in the game. I'll first explain the old BGs and then go into the new BGs. So if you're only concerned about the new BGs, then check this timestamp. So let's start from the beginning of the match. If you're attacking the heart, then there's one thing you can do as a Tempest that many other classes can't do, and that is zoom past everyone in the spawn area and force the enemies to chase you out of the spawn and potentially around the whole map while the rest of your team continues the push. Basically, you want to look for the most opportune time to leave, which is usually after everyone uses their abilities for the first time, and then you hug a wall and dash all the way out of spawn. If you aren't able to make it out on your first try, or you die before even getting to the spawn, then that's okay. Once you're able to respawn, you can wait on the respawn screen until things chill out a bit, or you can do my favorite thing and click resurrect, and then do not move a muscle. You'll still show up in the spawn, but you'll be invulnerable for about 10 to 15 seconds. 9 times out of 10, the enemy will blow their cooldowns on you, and you can use this gap created by their impatience to dash directly to an idol or beyond. And now onto the fun part. Killing people. In-game, of course. If you remember the combo I mentioned earlier, this is all about stunning and bursting. The idol is going to be your home base, essentially. So you stay on the idol until you see an enemy coming close. Then you can get the jump on them and stun lock them, kill them, then return back to base. As long as there's one other person on the side with you that's helping keep the idol in constant motion, then this is the best strategy to do. The only real considerations are when you're fighting a barb or a satyr. When fighting a barb, you should try to get them to Undying Rage before they reach the idol, so that way once they're standing on it, it doesn't count. And the same kind of thing goes for satyrs, but what you're trying to do is bait their immunity to damage as early as possible. So that way, by the time they reach the idol, they won't have as much impact as they normally would. And if either of these classes do make it to the idol, then now you're going to kind of shift your strategy and try to hug the very edge of either the idol or whatever circles you can see from their damaging abilities as you wait for them to die. You don't want to be standing next to a barb, and you don't want to be standing inside of the falling sword of a crusader. If you're defending, it's a little bit different. You have to pay very good attention to the map to find ways to jump behind the enemy and to pick the best idol to go to and help. Depending on the situation at the idol, you can either jump directly on top of it, or let your team do that while you try and meander around and dive the backline to take out the wizards and demon hunters. So using all of your stuns, you can very often and very easily kill everyone in the backline. And if you're able to get a deep flank, then you can even catch these people who are running away from the idol to heal, further securing the idol for your team and keeping the momentum of the game on your team's side. When you approach an idol with people on it, you can also try to bait them into following you off the idol. This is best achieved when you can convince them that you're trying to fight them on the idol. And if you pull a satyr or barb off of, then you can kite them as you make them pop their immunity to damage or get them into Undying Rage. Then you just wait a couple seconds, turn around, and start pushing towards them. And that covers the old BG, and now on to the new Battleground game mode. So the principles are very similar to the old Battlegrounds, except the overall goal of your efforts is going to be a little bit different. And this is going to be easier to explain because in every game you're both the attacker and defender. So from the start, you are best positioned to be standing in the offensive on your own idol. I would recommend staying on your idol more than taking the portal across to disrupt them at the beginning, and then I'll explain why that is. So the best way to really develop a strategy to win is to see what an ideal game looks like, and to think about how you can get your team into that position each time. I'll play this clip of one of my best games and explain it as I go. From the start, I stay on our own idol in order to fight whoever jumps across, and then I make sure to stay until they're dead. The second I can see that our idol is secure and we're pushing, I run over to the idol to disrupt them. I don't take the portal. And since we've waited a little bit, we'll have a better time overall in fighting the enemy. And also, my team has done a good job of disrupting them, so they're a little bit more spread out. And it makes it easier for me to go pick good fights. So the goal here is to pull enemies off of their idol and to have them chase you while you kite them, or you go around the idol in any direction to kill their DPS. It's best for you to try and pick one-on-one or one-on-two fights so that you can stun lock an enemy while you kill them, by alternating Flowing Strike with Tidal Rush and then bursting them down. So our team in this game played this exact strategy perfectly, so we were able to lock them at the first checkpoint. And from here, we can employ one of the best winning strategies overall. Once your team has a checkpoint advantage, you can switch to playing 100% defense for the rest of the game. If your team is able to hold them at the checkpoint, then you'll win without trying it that hard at all. In this game, as soon as I left our idol in the beginning, I never went back to it until we were pushing to the third checkpoint. I stayed on their idol the whole time, trying to stop them. And by the time we had gotten to the third checkpoint, it's almost impossible for them to go and try and attack, because if they leave their idol, then we will win in just a few seconds. And this plays out exactly like that, as once we've reached a third checkpoint, they never touched their idol again. Instead, they're focusing on trying to defend. But we've gained way too much momentum to be stopped, so we secure a very quick and very easy win. So that is the basic strategy of the new Battleground mode. If you aren't able to get a perfect start, then you can just apply these same principles to whatever point in the game you are to try to get a checkpoint advantage. This new game mode is not about taking the heart. It's about covering more ground than your opponent. And then another thing is, when you're at the first and third checkpoints, make sure you are running to this healing potion and using it. This is an often forgot about thing for some reason, but if you're low HP, go over it, click it, eat the tomato, and you're good. So thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe. Help me reach my goal of 1,000 subscribers. The support y'all give me is immense. I'm very grateful for it. As well, if you have any questions, please leave them down below and I'll get back to them. And check out my Discord for more information and to help me build a little community. Peace.